I never thought I'd be the guy typing out his life story on Reddit, but here I am. Let me just start by saying I've always believed in the best of people. I trusted easily, loved deeply, and worked hard to provide for my wife, Lisa. 11 years of marriage. Long enough to build a life together. Long enough to trust someone implicitly. Long enough to get blindsided. Lisa and I met in college. She was the vivacious, charming girl who lit up every room she walked into. I was the quiet one with big dreams, working 2 jobs to get through school. We clicked instantly. She was the kind of person who made you feel alive just by being around her. I was smitten, and before I knew it, we were planning our future together. We got married right after graduation, and for a while, life was good, really good. Fast forward to last year, when Lisa came to me with a confession. She'd made some bad financial decisions. A $300,000 loan. I was floored. How does someone even rack up that kind of debt without their spouse knowing? But Lisa had her reasons, family medical expenses, she claimed, combined with some ill-fated investments. She begged me to help. She was in tears, promising it was her biggest mistake and swearing she'd never hide anything from me again. I believed her. How could I not? She was my wife, my partner, my everything. We liquidated savings, sold a rental property we'd been holding on to, and even refinanced our house to cover the loan. I worked overtime, picked up consulting gigs, and lived on little more than coffee and stress for almost a year to get her out of that mess. Lisa was grateful, or at least she acted like it. She called me her hero, her rock. It felt good to be needed. Then, last month, the loan was finally paid off. I felt like I could breathe again, like we could finally move forward. Lisa even planned a little celebration dinner. She wore her best dress, ordered an expensive bottle of wine, and toasted to our future. I'll admit, I was proud of us. It wasn't until a week later that everything unraveled. It started with a letter. Divorce papers. Out of nowhere. At first, I thought it was a joke. I even laughed, thinking, Lisa, you've outdone yourself this time. But she wasn't joking. She sat me down, tears in her eyes, and said she needed a fresh start. The words hit me like a freight train. A fresh start? After everything I sacrificed for her? It wasn't just the divorce. As I read through the papers, I realized she'd been planning this for months. The timing, the separation of assets, it all lined up too perfectly. And suddenly, I understood. The loan wasn't just a mistake. It was a setup. She'd let me dig her out of her hole, and now, with her finances wiped clean, she was cutting me loose. She underestimated me, though. Lisa thought she could just walk away, but she didn't realize who she was dealing with. That night, I sat in our quiet house. My house, technically, replaying the past year in my mind. Every detail, every little thing I'd ignored because I loved her. And then, with a clarity I hadn't felt in months, I decided. If she wanted a fresh start, I'd give it to her. But it wouldn't come cheap. After the shock wore off, I felt something else creeping in. A cold, simmering anger. Lisa had manipulated me. She took advantage of my love, my trust, and my willingness to sacrifice. But more than that, she thought I'd let her walk away scot-free. That's what really got to me. The arrogance. The audacity. I spent the next few days carefully gathering myself, my thoughts, and my resources. The house was quiet. Lisa had left to give me space, or so she claimed, though I suspected she was probably shacking up with some guy. I didn't care. Not yet, anyway. My focus was on the bigger picture. The first thing I did was pull up the prenup. You see, Lisa hadn't been as clever as she thought. Before we got married, I had insisted on a prenuptial agreement. It wasn't romantic, and it definitely wasn't something Lisa was thrilled about, but I'd worked too hard to risk losing everything over love. The agreement was ironclad, thanks to my father's lawyer, who was more paranoid than I was. It clearly stated that in the event of a divorce, Lisa would walk away with only what was explicitly hers, no claim to my assets, savings, or the house. And then there was the clause about infidelity. If Lisa had been unfaithful during the marriage, the prenup gave me grounds to challenge any claim she made to spousal support. I didn't think much of it at the time. It felt like a formality, just another precaution in case life went sideways. But now, it was my secret weapon. I started digging. I combed through phone records, credit card statements, and her social media accounts. Lisa had been careful, but not careful enough. Little things began to stand out. A hotel charge here, a late-night Uber ride there. And then I found it. An email she'd left logged in on her tablet, sent to someone named Nathan. My stomach twisted as I read the words. Last night was amazing. I can't wait to see you again. That was all the confirmation I needed. The next step was calling my lawyer. He was the same one who drafted our prenup, and he wasted no time getting to work. We filed a petition to dispute her divorce terms, citing the infidelity clause. That alone put us in a position of power. But I wasn't done yet. While my lawyer worked on the legal side, I started unraveling Lisa's carefully constructed image. I made calls to her family and close friends, polite, measured calls, of course. I explained that we were separating, but I didn't hold back on the reasons. I made sure they knew about the affair, the loan, and her plans to leave me high and dry. Most of them were shocked. A few, I could tell, already knew. But by the end of those conversations, the seeds were planted. Lisa thrived on her reputation as the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I knew it would sting when her perfect facade started to crack. The final piece of my plan was more personal. Lisa had always loved our house. She decorated it, treated it like her sanctuary, and bragged about it to everyone who would listen. So, I decided she wouldn't get to keep it. It wasn't just about the legalities anymore. It was about taking back control. I started making subtle changes, things I knew would bother her if she ever came back. I boxed up her clothes and makeup, neatly labeled with her name. I took down the photos of us together and replaced them with artwork I'd always liked but she hated. I canceled her memberships and subscriptions, everything from her yoga studio to the Wine of the Month club. Petty? Maybe. But satisfying? Absolutely. Then I did something I knew would hit her hardest. I listed the house for sale. The house she adored. The house she told everyone was her dream home. I didn't need to sell it. Financially, I was fine. But I wanted to. I wanted to erase the life we built together and start fresh. When Lisa finally called, probably expecting to gloat about her new life, she was in for a surprise. It was almost poetic how long Lisa waited to call me. 2 weeks of silence, during which I stayed busy executing my plans. I wasn't sulking, I wasn't wallowing, I was preparing. By the time her name popped up on my phone, I was ready. Hello? I answered, keeping my tone neutral. Hey, she said hesitantly. How are you holding up? It took everything I had not to laugh. How am I holding up? The nerve of this woman. But I kept my cool. I'm fine, Lisa. What do you need? There was a pause, and I could almost hear her piecing together her words. I wanted to check in. Things got tense when I left, and I didn't want to leave things like that. Tense? That's an interesting word for what happened, I replied, letting a bit of the edge slip into my voice. You dropped divorce papers on me out of nowhere. I think it's fair to say we're past tense. She sighed, playing the victim like she always did when things didn't go her way. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. I needed to start over. I've been feeling stuck for a long time, and I didn't know how to tell you. You didn't know how to tell me? I repeated, incredulous. But you knew how to use me. You knew how to ask for help when you needed me to bail you out of that loan. Funny how that works. Her voice tightened. That's not fair, and you know it. I didn't force you to pay off the loan. You offered. Because you love me. Or, at least, I thought you did. It was such a masterclass in manipulation that I almost applauded. Almost. Love and manipulation aren't the same thing, Lisa. And as far as I'm concerned, whatever love I had for you evaporated the moment I found out about Nathan. Silence. For a brief, satisfying moment, I had the upper hand. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaking. Nathan doesn't mean anything. It was a mistake. 11 years of marriage, I said coldly. How many other mistakes have there been, Lisa? Or is he the only one I've been paying for? Her sharp inhale told me I'd hit a nerve. You don't understand. It's complicated. No, I snapped, my patience finally wearing thin. It's simple. You used me to clean up your financial mess, and now you want to walk away. But here's the thing, Lisa. You don't get to control how this ends. Her tone changed, growing defensive. What is that supposed to mean? It means you might want to check your email, I said, my voice icy. I had my lawyer send over a counterproposal to your divorce terms. You should probably read it before we continue this conversation. She hesitated, but I could tell she was scrambling. What did you do? Nothing you didn't deserve, I said. You wanted out, Lisa. I'm just making sure you leave with what's fair, which, considering your infidelity, isn't much. Her voice rose, tinged with panic. You can't do this. You can't just cut me out. Oh, I can, I said, my tone calm but firm. And I already have. By the way, you might want to find a new place to live. The house is on the market. She gasped audibly. You listed the house? Without telling me? It's my house, Lisa. Read the prenup. You signed it. For a moment, I thought she might start crying, but she held it together. Barely. You're being vindictive, she spat. This isn't you. You're right. This isn't the old me, I agreed. This is the me you created when you lied to me, cheated on me, and treated me like a fool. If you don't like it, that's not my problem. Russell, she said, her voice softening in a last-ditch attempt to sway me. We don't have to do this. We can still fix things. I almost laughed. The audacity was staggering. There's nothing to fix, Lisa. It's already broken. Goodbye. And with that, I hung up, blocking her number before she could call back. After that call, Lisa officially knew I wasn't going to roll over. She had underestimated me, thinking I'd crumble under the weight of betrayal. Instead, I was thriving, not emotionally, of course. My heart still ached, and the anger bubbled just beneath the surface. But mentally, strategically, I was laser-focused. The day after our conversation, I visited my lawyer's office to finalize the counterproposal. The terms were straightforward. Lisa would receive none of the marital assets beyond what she brought into the marriage, which, if you're wondering, wasn't much. Thanks to her infidelity, she had forfeited any claims to spousal support. The prenup left no room for argument. She's going to fight this, my lawyer said, leaning back in his chair as he reviewed the document. You're essentially cutting her off completely. That's the idea, I said. She wanted a fresh start. Let her have it. Just not on my dime. He nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I have to admit, it's refreshing to see someone prepared for this kind of situation. Most people come in here blindsided. Trust is expensive, I replied. Turns out I was paying for it all along. With the legalities in motion, I turned my attention to other matters. First, I made sure to secure everything that mattered to me: bank accounts, retirement funds, and investments. I changed passwords, updated beneficiary information, and transferred anything valuable into accounts she couldn't touch. The house was already in my name, so there was no risk there. Then came the small victories. I contacted her favorite salon and canceled the standing appointments I'd been paying for. I froze the credit card she used for online shopping. Every little luxury she had enjoyed on my dime vanished overnight. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. Next, I met with the realtor handling the house sale. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Angela, and I trusted her immediately. Here's the deal, I told her during our first meeting. This house needs to sell quickly. Price it aggressively. I want it gone. Angela raised an eyebrow but didn't question me. Got it. Any restrictions on showings? None, I said. The sooner we find a buyer, the better. As I signed the paperwork, I thought about how much Lisa had loved this house. It was her sanctuary, the place she poured her energy into. Selling it felt like reclaiming a part of myself she'd taken for granted. By the end of the week, the listing was live. The photos showcased the house in all its glory. Every detail she had painstakingly curated now advertised to strangers. I imagined her reaction when she saw it online. The thought brought a small, grim smile to my face. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach me. Lisa's sister called first, her voice dripping with thinly veiled disapproval. Russell, I just talked to Lisa. She's devastated. She says you're trying to ruin her. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. Devastated? Huh? Did she mention the affair? There was a pause. She said it was complicated. Of course she did, I said bitterly. But it's not complicated. She cheated, lied, and left me the moment I paid off her debt. Now, she's facing the consequences. Her sister sighed. You've always been the bigger person. Can't you just let this go? Bigger person? I repeated, the words almost choking me. I was the bigger person when I worked myself into the ground to clean up her mess. Now, I'm just making sure she lives with the choices she made. The conversation didn't last much longer. Lisa's sister tried to guilt me into reconsidering, but I wasn't budging. I had spent years being the bigger person, and where had it gotten me? Alone and betrayed. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. Friends, distant relatives, even mutual acquaintances who had somehow gotten my number. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them sided with Lisa. But I didn't care. For every person who tried to guilt me, there was someone else who quietly supported me. My best friend, Jake, was one of them. Good for you, man, he said over drinks one night. About time someone taught her actions have consequences. I'm not trying to teach her a lesson, I replied. I'm just done being her safety net. Whatever you call it, you're doing the right thing, Jake said. She played you, and now she's getting what she deserves. I wasn't sure if it was the right thing, but it felt necessary. The life I thought we had built together was a lie, and I wasn't about to let her rewrite the narrative. If Lisa wanted to start over, she'd have to do it on her own. It didn't take long for Lisa to feel the weight of her decisions. A week after the divorce counterproposal landed in her inbox, she showed up unannounced at the house. I'd been expecting it. People like Lisa always try to claw their way back when they realize they're losing. When I opened the door, she looked disheveled. Her usually pristine appearance was replaced with hastily tied hair, minimal makeup, and an expression that danced somewhere between guilt and desperation. Russell, she started, her voice cracking. Can we talk? I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. About what? I think we've said everything that needs saying. Please, she said softly, her hands clasped together. Just let me come inside. 5 minutes. I stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but I was curious to see what she'd say. She perched on the edge of the couch, clutching her purse like it was a life raft. I stayed standing. What do you want, Lisa? I asked, my tone flat. I've been thinking, she began, avoiding eye contact. About us. About everything. I made a mistake, Russell. A huge mistake. You're going to have to be more specific, I said, my arms still crossed. Which mistake are we talking about? The loan? The lies? Or the affair? She flinched but pushed forward. All of it. I should have been honest with you. I should have tried harder to make things work instead of running away. You should have, I agreed. But you didn't. So, what's the point of this conversation? Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. Not this time. I want us to fix this, she said. I want to come home. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Home? You mean the house I paid for? The one I'm selling? Her face fell. You can't sell this house, Russell. It's our home. It was our home, I corrected. Now it's just a house. And you lost any claim to it the moment you filed for divorce. I wasn't thinking clearly, she said, her voice trembling. I was scared, and I made stupid decisions. But I love you, Russell. I always have. Her words should have meant something. A year ago, they would have. But now, they rang hollow, like an echo of a life that no longer existed. I shook my head. Love doesn't look like what you've done, Lisa. It doesn't use someone, lie to them, or betray them. Whatever you feel for me, it's not love. Tears streamed down her face now, but I didn't waver. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. Please, Russell, she begged. Don't throw everything away. I'm not the one who threw it away, I said coldly. You did. Her tears turned to anger then, her voice rising. So that's it? You're just going to give up on us? After everything we've been through? You gave up on us the moment you cheated, I said, my tone steady. I'm just closing the chapter. She stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to find some crack in my resolve. When she realized there wasn't one, she stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. You'll regret this, she said, her voice dripping with venom. I promise you, Russell, you'll regret it. I watched her storm out, her heels clicking angrily on the hardwood floor. As the door slammed behind her, I felt an odd sense of relief. It was like exhaling after holding my breath for years. The next few weeks were eerily quiet. Lisa didn't contact me again, though I heard through mutual friends that she was struggling. She'd moved in with a coworker temporarily, and her finances were in shambles without me propping them up. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt. After all, I had spent over a decade caring for her, and old habits die hard. But then I'd remind myself that she'd made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. One evening, I got a call from Angela, my realtor. She sounded excited. "Russell, we've got a solid offer on the house," she said. "Well over the asking price. Cash deal." "Perfect," I replied. "Let's move forward." As I hung up the phone, a strange sense of closure washed over me. Selling the house felt like shedding the last piece of our failed marriage. It was a symbol of everything Lisa had taken for granted, and now it was finally out of my hands. I began packing the few things I wanted to keep: photos of my parents, my personal belongings, and a handful of sentimental items. Everything else would go with the house or end up donated. It felt good to let go, to start fresh. The sale of the house closed faster than I expected. True to Angela's word, the buyer paid cash, and within 3 weeks, I was holding a hefty check and a sense of finality. The house, which once symbolized the life I thought I'd built with Lisa, was no longer my burden. With the funds in my account, I was ready to start the next chapter of my life. I rented a small, modern apartment downtown, a far cry from the sprawling suburban house I'd just left behind, but it suited me. It was a fresh start in every sense of the word. No memories of Lisa lingered in these walls. No ghosts of a marriage that had unraveled so painfully. The move was quick, and the process oddly therapeutic. I sold most of my furniture, only keeping what I truly needed or loved. The clutter was gone, both physically and emotionally. My life felt lighter, cleaner. But even as I settled into my new place, Lisa wasn't completely out of my orbit. Mutual friends occasionally brought her up, often with a tone of pity. "She's not doing well," one friend told me over lunch. "She's staying with a coworker, but it's temporary. Her finances are a mess." I nodded but said nothing. What was there to say? Lisa had made her choices, and I had made mine. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if she was finally understanding the gravity of what she'd done. About a month after the house sold, I came home from work to find a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable, Lisa's. I stared at it for a long moment, debating whether to open it. Curiosity won out. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. Her words were carefully chosen, as if she'd spent hours crafting the letter. It read, "Russell, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. For the lies, the betrayal, the way I treated you. I can't undo the damage I've done, but I want you to know that I regret it. I thought I wanted freedom, a fresh start, but all I've done is ruin the best thing that ever happened to me. I've been a fool, Russell. You gave me everything. Your love, your trust, your support, and I threw it away. I thought I'd find happiness somewhere else, but all I've found is emptiness. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. Please, if there's any part of you that can still find it in your heart to forgive me, I hope you will. Lisa." I read the letter twice, then folded it back up and set it on the counter. Her words didn't stir the emotions she probably hoped they would. If anything, they felt hollow, a last-ditch attempt to salvage her dignity. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry for the consequences. I didn't respond. By now, I'd pieced together enough information about Lisa's affair to know who Nathan was. He was a colleague, someone she'd worked closely with during her late nights at the office. The thought of confronting him had crossed my mind more than once, but I'd held back. Until now, one afternoon, I decided it was time. I wasn't looking for closure. I'd already found that. What I wanted was clarity, a face-to-face understanding of who this man was and why Lisa had thrown away our marriage for him. I found him at a coffee shop near their office. He was exactly what I expected: polished, smug, and oblivious to the havoc he'd helped create. I walked up to his table, my presence catching him off guard. "Russell," I said, extending a hand. "Mind if I sit?" He hesitated but eventually nodded, motioning to the chair across from him. "I assume you know who I am." "I do," I said, my tone measured. "You're the guy who helped my wife destroy our marriage." His face flushed, and he shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I didn't mean for—" "Save it," I interrupted. "I'm not here for excuses. I just want to know one thing. Was it worth it?" He blinked, caught off guard. "What? Was it worth it?" I repeated. "The sneaking around, the lies, the destruction. Was it worth everything you and Lisa did?" His eyes darted away, and for a moment, he didn't speak. Finally, he muttered, "No, it wasn't." I nodded, standing up. "Good. Because she's all yours now." I left him sitting there, his face pale and his coffee untouched. With the house sold, Lisa out of my life, and Nathan thoroughly confronted, I felt an unfamiliar sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I was living life on my terms, not tethered to someone else's expectations or drama. I threw myself into work, hobbies I'd neglected, and reconnecting with old friends. One Saturday, I joined a group of colleagues for a hike. The fresh air, the camaraderie. It reminded me of who I used to be before my marriage became a trap. At the top of the trail, as we looked out over a sprawling valley, I realized I was no longer carrying the weight of Lisa's betrayal. I was lighter, freer. I even started dating again, cautiously at first. The thought of opening myself up to someone new was daunting, but I wasn't rushing into anything. I wasn't looking for a replacement for Lisa. I was looking for myself. While I moved forward, Lisa seemed to spiral. Word got back to me through mutual acquaintances that her financial situation had worsened. The coworker she'd been staying with asked her to leave, and she was now living in a small, dingy apartment. She'd lost her job, too. Apparently, office gossip about her affair with Nathan had reached the higher-ups. Nathan, for his part, had distanced himself from her. I wasn't surprised. Men like him rarely stick around when things get messy. Lisa had gambled everything, and now she was paying the price. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but I didn't. She'd made her choices. Now she had to live with them. Months passed without any direct contact from Lisa. Then, one afternoon, I ran into her by chance. I was at a grocery store, picking up a few things for the weekend, when I saw her in the next aisle. She looked thinner, older, almost like a shadow of the woman I used to know. She saw me, too, and hesitated before approaching. "Russell," she said quietly. "Lisa," I replied, my tone neutral. "How have you been?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "Good," I said. "Really good." She nodded, looking down at the floor. "I've been meaning to call you. To apologize again. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but—" "You're right," I interrupted. "You don't." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel the need to console her. "I'm sorry for everything," she said, her voice trembling. "I wish I could go back and undo it all." "You can't," I said simply. "And honestly, I'm glad you can't. Because if none of this had happened, I might never have realized how much better off I am without you." She flinched, and for a moment, I felt a twinge of guilt. But then I remembered everything she'd done, and the feeling passed. I nodded, turned, and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the aisle. As the months turned into a year, my life flourished in ways I hadn't imagined. I got promoted at work, traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, and even started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Each day felt like a step further from the man I'd been when Lisa was in my life. A man who constantly gave and sacrificed, only to be taken for granted. I met someone new, too. Her name was Claire. She was kind, intelligent, and had a warmth about her that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. We took things slow, but for the first time in years, I felt hope. Not just for love, but for a future built on mutual respect and trust. Looking back on everything, I realized Lisa's betrayal, as painful as it was, had been the catalyst for something better. It forced me to confront the cracks in our marriage, the ways I'd allowed myself to be diminished, and the truth about who she really was. I don't hate her anymore. I don't feel much of anything for her, honestly. She's just someone I used to know, someone whose choices shaped my life in ways neither of us could have anticipated. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Trust is fragile, but so is dependence. I depended on Lisa for happiness, for validation, for a sense of purpose. Losing her taught me that I could find all of that within myself. And now, as I sit here in my apartment, typing this out for strangers on the internet, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. Peace.